Chapter 2. Journeys of the Spirit. During some indefinable time at night, while Fastillion laid on his side on the floor of the wigwam, a confounding realization disturbed him. He opened his eyes to discover that his fire no longer provided heat or illumination as it did before. During his lapse of attention, the wigwam had grown so much in size that the only way he had of knowing that it still existed was the distant smoke hole overhead that was like a single gleaming star. The tallest of the forest's trees would not have reached even halfway to the distant light. The illumination of his fire allowed him to see himself, the floor around him, and his latest drinking bowl, but nothing else. Fastillion stood up and saw his breath as the cold air around him turned it into mist. He didn't feel any need to grapple with the reality of his experience. Whether he was awake or dreaming didn't even occur to him. As Fastillion turned about to examine the awesome new dimensions of the wigwam, he noticed that the light of his fire illuminated a thin fog that rose from the ground to gather around him. The mist was nearly stable in the windless calm. Its placid undulations were ominous and gave the room an underworldly aspect. The small fire suddenly changed its hue from the radiant shades of sunset to luminous greens, blues, and turquoise. A distant sound of drums started to drift up from the fire as though it was a doorway to some great chamber beneath the floor where a ceremony took place. The sound of the drums intensified, and then the light that streamed in from the overhead smoke hole flickered before it shattered as though it passed through a prism. Broad, flat sheets of coloured light arced down from the hole to strike the ground in the form of a wide road of rainbow-coloured light. Fastillion knew from his Norse upbringing that he could only be seeing the emergence of Bifrost, the Rainbow Bridge. It was a magical roadway under the control of Odin, the supreme all-father of the Norse gods in Asgard. With it, the god travelled to anywhere in the 9 worlds, and if need be, he could take with him all the other gods and all his legions from Valhalla, his Einherjar warriors. No sooner had the bridge touched down than came a new drumming sound, but it was loud like the hammering blows of thunder. Many times Fastillion had heard the clopping sound of hooves from various breeds of great deer, but they were as nothing compared to the approach of the golden stallion that descended down the Bifrost Bridge's 3-strand roadway. There were no horses west of Greenland, and Fastillion had never even seen a drawing of one, but he knew that he saw one then. The deiform charger stood with shoulders high as 3 times Fastillion's height, and upon its back rode a figure of equally impressive scale. The rider was a towering warrior that was so tall that if Fastillion stood beside him, he would only have come as high as the being's knee. The rider was beardless and had long silver braids streaming down from beneath his steel helmet. His face was inhumanly handsome, but still stern and unyielding. He wore garb that was entirely in the Norse style and of the finest manufacture. His chainmail was of minute interlinked rings that were the colour of tarnished silver. In one hand, he held his reins along with a spiralling ivory warhorn that sported gold banding and numerous gemstones. His other hand held a naked, gleaming broadsword that was longer than half again Fastillion's height. Fastillion felt certain that he gazed upon the Norse god Heimdall, of whom he had heard many tales. He was the tireless guardian of the Bifrost Bridge, who was destined to sound a call from his horn Giala to signal the gods on the day of Ragnarok, when the frost giants would assault them in a final war that would end the world. Though Fastillion recognized the god, he had never even heard it suggested that Heimdall was one of the Vanir, the godly race of elves from Vanaheim, like the god Freyr and the goddess Freya, which he clearly was at a glance. Heimdall surveyed his destination, but made no more recognition of Fastillion than he did of the dirt beneath the hooves of his horse. His gaze lastly settled on the small fire at Fastillion's feet, then a contemptuous sneer curled up on his thin elfin lips. The fire seemed to retort his scorn by increasing the sound of its drums and then flaring briefly before dying down with a vast outpouring of smoke. The smoke didn't continue to rise, but instead began to gather and coalesce into an ever-widening disk directly above the emerald flames. As Fastillion gazed into the swirling shield of smoke, it continued to thicken and grow until it became 10 paces in diameter. Once its rapid growth abated, the smoke transformed into quicksilver, upon which Fastillion saw his cast reflection. The smoke mirror rippled like a pool of water before a giant black panther sprang from within its depths. The predatory cat was of equal size to Heimdall's steed, and the horse neighed from the fear and discomfort that it felt at being so close to the fearsome beast. In Norse, with his antiquated accent, Heimdall asked the panther, "Were you skulking in that fire waiting for me, Jaguar Lord?" His elven voice was both imposing and yet beautiful for a mortal to hear. Though the predatory beast disturbed his mount, Heimdall did not feel in the least intimidated. "Too bad I'm here on business," he mused with a flourish of his broadsword, "or I could teach you a new way to skin a cat. Like you, I but humbly prepare the way for my master," the colossal predator explained his presence in Algonquin. He spoke with a fearsome masculine voice that contained a deep bass with a panther's growls and gurgles. "It's not your fate to die by my fangs. That shall be Loki's pleasure. I could find it within myself to send you walking home." To prove his boast, the panther roared at the horse he wanted to kill, and it made the mount rear up in a neighing of fear and a flashing of iron-shod hooves. Heimdall reined in his horse and then sheathed his sword. "I'm a true god of men, lowly beast lord. I'll not dirty my sword Hofud with the blood of a sovereign of mere animals." He brought his horn Gjallar to his lips, then blew a single beautiful note that spread afar from the giant wigwam. "I have others at my disposal that will gladly clear this shrine of your loathsome presence." The clamour of many booted feet came down from on high as a host of fighting men charged down the Bifrost Bridge. Within moments, 100 howling warriors descended to gather about its base as a furious pack of savages. All of the men were Caucasians with heroic builds and fierce natures. Most of them wore chainmail armour with iron-bound round shields. They carried various wrought iron and hearth-steel weapons typical of veteran Norse warriors. Others dressed in ragged furs and carried more primitive arms that incorporated killing edges that they had crafted from stone or copper. All of them were fearsome men of legendary proportions and surly dispositions. Fastillion had no doubt that they were a small sampling of Odin's Einherjar horde. The Jaguar Lord bristled in anger, and his hackle fur rose up in warning. "You foolishly attribute too little to me, paltry herald. In the East, my influence has dwindled to a few worshippers, and those things feline. But you're about to learn that in this land, I am the revered patron of many great warrior shamans." The giant panther roared so loud and long that Fastillion fell to his knees and covered his ears. The sound caused the smoke mirror to ripple again, and from its depths emerged a host of Marklanders. First to step forth was a magnificently dressed man of muscle and maturity. His splendid loincloth and cloak bore geometric patterns in colours of vibrant green and turquoise. A huge headdress of feathers adorned his head, with additional feathers that formed cuffs around his wrists and ankles. Around his neck hung a thick chain of gold that supported a huge flat skull that was also of purest gold. More gold hung as rings from his ears and the septum of his nose. He wore a small shield strapped to his left forearm. Its surface sported a red-painted background with the ogling face of a tusked demon. In his hands he held a bizarre copper-bladed axe that was better suited for a thrusting attack than chopping. His face smiled and he seemed eager to wage war. The confident grin revealed that stones of sparkling jade bejeweled each of his teeth. The man cried out in his strange native tongue, then the words echoed so that they came back to Fastillion's ears. In the Algonquin language he understood. "The cat lord calls. Behold, smoking jaguar answers." The second man to leap out from the smoke mirror festooned himself equally well in a cloak and loincloth of light blue that bore many red seashells and a crimson fringe. His weapon was an intricate battle club that had 2 ridged lines of black volcanic glass that ran down its length so that it had the form of a double-edged sword. The obsidian shards that made up the cutting edges of his artistic weapon were razor-sharp and undoubtedly deadly. Unlike the man before him, the second warrior's battle-ready grin had teeth stained all in black. "Lightning Frog also hearkens to the call," the man shouted proudly, "and with me comes a host of jaguar knights, each of note and legend." As proof of his words, 100 hulking Markland warriors sprang from the smoke mirror in a flood of shouting and waving weapons. They carried spears and axes with blades of copper, flint, or obsidian. Some of them held club swords like lightning frogs, and others had simple battle clubs adorned with intricate carvings. What distinguished them as a band of brothers with similar spirit were the skins of panthers that they all wore. Some of the pelts were black-spotted coats of yellow and orange, while others were pure black, or the tawny hue of the northern breed of panthers that Fastillion knew and had seen. Not all the warriors wore their pelts in the same way, and they also adorned themselves with different styles of jewelry. Clearly, they were not of one people, but they all knew the Beast Lord who had summoned them and welcomed the chance to fight in his name. The Einherjar roared in a battle cry that the Jaguar Knights answered with howls of their own. Heimdall and the Jaguar Lord remained impassive as their respective armies flung themselves at one another, bent on slaughtering their opposition. Fastillion discovered with great relief that he was invisible and intangible to both groups of warriors. Einherjar plunged right through him as they rushed forward to slay their Jaguar Knight foes. As he watched the battle unfold, his first impression was that the taller and stronger Einherjar clearly overmatched the Jaguar Knights. The Marklanders' comparatively primitive weapons were poorly suited for piercing armor formed from wrought iron. The hearth-steel blades of the Einherjar, however, should have easily been able to pierce the Jaguar Knight's armor, which the Marklanders had crafted from animal hides or various woven materials, including flax, feathers, and indigenous cotton. The Einherjar were each indisputable masters of single combat, but they knew next to nothing about concerted effort or unified military tactics. Worse than not being able to cooperate, their large weapons and flamboyant fighting styles forced them to give one another excessive personal space. The Jaguar Knights were men who prized agility and could fight easily in their light, flexible armor. Unlike the Einherjar, they were skilled in fighting as a corps and even compartmentalized their efforts. Their lead warriors would draw in attacks from the Einherjar's superior weapons, then negate them with shields or parries. Other Jaguar Knights dedicated themselves to attacking distracted Einherjar. Instead of trying to kill their heavily armored and burly opponents, they would attack their joints and vital areas with specialized techniques intended to subdue enemies for live capture. The Jaguar Knights carried lengths of cord for tying their victims' hands and even bags for covering their heads. The Einherjar were capable of inflicting the most savage of wounds, but they quickly found that in even numbers the Jaguar Knights were a match for them. Smoking Jaguar and Lightning Frog stayed in the rear of their forces to shout commands, as would the generals of genius that they were. The Einherjar had no commanders and no need for instruction. Even when fighting for a cause, their first motivation was to accumulate personal glory. 3/4 of the Einherjar ended up captured or dead, with half the Jaguar Knights still assaulting them when resounding footsteps sounded from mighty boots as they descended the Bifrost Bridge. The surviving Einherjar were their best and brightest. They adopted new methods and enjoyed a renaissance of success. They would likely slaughter the remaining Jaguar Knights before those enemies brought them down. The Jaguar Lord gazed up the bridge to see who approached and then called to his 2 Jaguar generals. "Enough," he commanded them. "Their master comes, for he knows his minions cannot secure a victory." Heimdall winded another note on his horn. At the sound, the remaining Einherjar withdrew from action. Smoking Jaguar and Lightning Frog ordered the surviving Jaguar Knights also to withdraw. The surviving Jaguar Knights drug off their captured Einherjar as they did so. They had nearly 200 wounded captives as proof of their skill and valor. The Vanir Bridge Guardian sidestepped his mount to clear the Bifrost Bridge and make way for the one who was coming down. Odin the Allfather, supreme god of the Aesir, walked down the bridge with his spear Gungnir in hand. He was even taller than Heimdall and also wore magnificent fighter's mail, but in addition he had a breastplate of polished watered steel. On his head he wore a golden helmet, and from his shoulders streamed a cloak that was red as freshly spilt blood. No patch covered the shriveled socket with his missing eye. The god took the form of a mature Nordic man with a full beard and powerful muscles. Heimdall smiled with disparagement, as if to dare the panther to renew the hostile action of his Jaguar Knights. "Behold," he spoke with pride, "my father Odin doth come." As Fastillion watched in amazement, he realized from his own life's experiences that Heimdall was an adopted son. It seemed obvious that he had still been an elf child when taken by the Aesir in their exchange of hostages with the Vanir. Odin had raised Heimdall as his stepson to be a unique amalgam of 2 contradictory natures. It was clear to which side Heimdall's loyalty lay. Perhaps his concession to his former people was being guardian of Bifrost Bridge and thus ensuring that war would never recur between the 2 factions. Odin gave his stepson an angry grimace. "I didn't send you here to play war games." His voice was that of the sternest of fathers. "Worst of all, you're not even winning." "I arrived to find this Beast Lord plotting interference." Heimdall pointed at the Jaguar Lord with his horn. I didn't think you would have me complicate matters by slaying the beast, so I sought to drive him off. His hand dropped to the hilt of his broadsword. Would you have me slay him now? You were always one for thinking too much, Odin told his stepson in disgusted disappointment. The time for acting decisively has long passed. I'm here now, and unlike you, I'm not one to leave my business to underlings. Odin turned his attention to the Jaguar Lord. I know that you're here just as a guide. Summon your master so that this can be settled. My master does not know the meaning of a summons, the Jaguar Lord growled. All of creation defers to his majesty, especially vagabond gods such as you. The insult enraged Heimdall, and he half drew his sword. Speak with respect, he warned. My father, the king of the Aesir, stands before you. Compared to my master, the panther told Heimdall, still speaking Algonquin, your father is a flea on the back of a bison. The smoke mirror shimmered unexpectedly, which caused the Jaguar Lord briefly to cast his gaze toward it. Behold a true majesty, the Beast Lord declared. Immaculate flying snake approaches, king god of the west. Fastillion watched the smoke mirror as yet another gigantic god entered the room. The being was in the form of an enormous beardless Marklander of mature years and somber expression. On his head he wore a beautiful golden helmet in the form of a serpentine dragon's head. The helmet incorporated a multicolored headdress of brilliantly hued feathers that merged into an even more magnificent cloak of birds' plumes. Yet more interwoven feathers made up his kingly tunic, and gold adorned him in many forms of splendid jewelry. A golden plug poked through a hole that pierced the god's lower lip. Golden fobs holding even more feathers fit through holes in the god's ears. As noble and wealthy the two Jaguar Knight generals appeared, Immaculate Flying Snake was 1,000 times superior. The two Markland Jaguar generals and their knights fell to their knees, then pressed their foreheads to the ground to show their respect for their god. The Jaguar Lord also performed a ceremonial bow. The Einherjar offered no respect to Immaculate Flying Snake, but they had to shrink back and avert their eyes, as they were unable to bear witness to his awesome majesty. Even Heimdall had to fully sheath his sword and lower his eyes before a god who was immeasurably more powerful than he. Odin made a growl in his deep voice. The bringer of death does not owe respect to the bringer of corn, he commented defiantly, without showing any sign of obeisance. Why do you come here? What business have you with a Norseman's child and future warlord among my Einherjar? The panther was about to speak again, but his master silenced him with a stroke to the scruff of his thickly muscled neck. The great cat responded by lying down at the bare feet of Immaculate Flying Snake as though he were no more than a favored house pet. I am best known in this age as the Master of Winds and Lord of the Everlasting Sky, the supreme Markland god told Odin matter-of-factly, but since you speak of maize, you should go forth and count the kernels that have sprouted this season in my land. By that number, you would know the size of the host that seeks my appeasement. I won't bother to scoff at the quantity of faithful you command within my territory, because soon enough the entire world will have forgotten the rituals of you and yours. Men sacrifice more to me on my least day of the calendar than your entire pantheon receives all year. As for the boy, you should consider the sacred blood of his mother's people. I think you have forgotten it in all your scheming about the father. The All-Father didn't go to the trouble of denying the truth, but neither did the revelation of his waning dominion diminish him. I forget nothing, Odin said with a smile, knowing that it was his godly destiny to see all things from his high seat of Hlidskjalf. The bloodline of your chosen people is also roasting in the fire of extinction. They sent the boy to have my people raise him because they lack the strength to protect him. I have already seen those things fate demands for his future from my high seat. After he proves himself in this merry little killing dance of war, he shall live among my faithful yet again. It was I who sent him on that first journey, Immaculate Flying Snake informed his rival, to keep him safe from enemies who would never have allowed him the chance to grow up and contest them. It was only ironic good fortune that a priest from the very faith that is busily extinguishing your already meager influences in the East adopted the boy. Though it is true that he must yet wander through the dregs of your past glory, in the end he shall return home to fight for the liberation of those he was born unto. We all have our priests, Odin replied in a cruel tone. While the Christian holy men and my faithful followers have their irreconcilable differences, the cross-bearers can still be of great use to me. As for the particular priest you speak of, he has always vexed me. I have a presentation plan that shall teach him what happens when those who forgive their enemies meet up with men who butcher them. Immaculate Flying Snake made the thinnest hint of a smile of his own. Your supposed demonstration shall only prove that even in your own sphere of influence you have already been usurped. The statement seared Odin like the jab of a hot poker. We shall see, he answered with growing rage, for my eternal providence is to be the guarantor of profiteering killers. I need neither shrines nor name recognition so long as I can rely on human nature. Even now, my Christian enemies adorn the helmets of their knights with my sacred symbols of the eagle and the boar. They fuse my methods into their own intolerance, and soon enough we will be on the same crusade. So know this, arrogant king god of the West, the day shall come when just a few ships full of my happy helpers will arrive on your shores in Christian guise to annihilate your uncountable colonels. They will gather your golden sweat as plunder while filling lakes with your followers' blood. Though that day is as yet far away, you and I are nothing if not patient. The most powerful of Markland's gods only acquiesced with slow resolve in that the prophecies of Odin were invariably true. All of creation inexorably grows cold, he commented. Today is for you, tomorrow for me. Still, I'm here now, and not all things in this world are decided. It is the boon of men to resist the course of fate and struggle to shape their own destinies. Enough of your banter, Odin dismissed Immaculate Flying Snake with a condescending wave. Unlike you, I was invited here by solemn prayers. His father's bloodline is an unbroken chain of Einherjar, stemming back to the days when his ancestors called me Woden and wielded stone-tipped spears against Roman legionnaires. Even now, there is an empty place for his grandfather at the feasting table of his ancestors in Valhalla. Odin took on an evil expression of pride. Surely you don't think you can interrupt such a legacy as all that? I already have, the Markland god answered in his pragmatic aloofness. The fathers you mention have a paltry lineage compared to that of his mother. Her people were the very progenitors of science and civilization for all mankind. They were farming and building mighty monuments in stone when your followers were still learning to scrape animal skins. Odin laughed heartily. Science and civilization. The Romans had both when my skin-draped hordes obliterated them. The soft arts of the mind are impotent against courage, ambition, and muscle. Then that shall be our contest, Immaculate Flying Snake declared. From me he shall receive his mother's arts of the mind, and you shall learn that not all of them are as soft as you say. When my shamans thrust him into the spirit world, I will send my servant Raven to show him the truth of his mother and the sacred people that beget him. That is fine with me, Odin accepted the challenge. I too know Raven. To me he is one of the three great spirits who consume the carrion of gods, elves, and giants who have fallen in battle. My pet ravens Hugin and Munin are from among his progeny, so I can trust him to reveal both sides of the boy's lineage. Through Raven I shall leave my mark upon your gift as well, so that he will not forget the strength of his father's blood in favor of his mother's people. Most significantly, because I am Odin, from me he shall acquire the armor that comes from suffering. Through the use of misfortune I shall purify him and hone his instincts, while at the same time stifling the weakness that comes from self-indulgence. I am the god who is both friend and enemy. Through me he shall have a face to hate, and thus I shall give meaning to his life. Just as I eulogize a man's murderous rage, so too do I glorify the revengeful wrath that kills him in turn. To me, hate is love, and so I always win. When the two mighty gods settled into a satisfied silence, Heimdall made an introspective sound under his breath. It was not a human intimation, but one born of his elegant elven ancestry. Odin gruffly asked his stepson, "What?" Heimdall responded thoughtfully, "In the guise of Rig, I have walked among every race and period of men. I have long endeavored to teach them those arts we Vanir love. Of all Midgard's creatures, none is more adaptive than man. To them, your competition is the same as cooperation. Together you may create something unexpected that serves neither of your interests." "Nonsense," Odin rejected the warning. "In the end, one of my Valkyrie shall wing him to Valhalla to join my Einherjar. Purity, instinct, and physical strength will always win out over the strategic contemplation of the weaker races. The frost giants know that even better than I do." "I believe there is a third path," Heimdall lectured. "I have been among men in this age who style themselves as warrior poets. They worship high culture, are unafraid of death, and study killing as an academic science. Odin shrugged. What of it? All social elegance eventually leads to decadent indulgence. The way fosters an inherent weakness that brings about the inevitable result of collapse into death. Thinkers contemplate out of the desperate hope that it might shield them from the wrath of the strong. It has always been that way, and they always fail. Yes, Heimdall agreed. But even so, I have lived among his mother's people. The unique powers of their thoughts are cultivated through self-deprivation and harnessed by concentrated introspection. Your methods can only serve to intensify immaculate flying snake's investments. It was the Vanir who toppled the first walls of Asgard, and no other race of men on Midgard are so much like us. I believe that the frost giants will conquer Asgard, not because they are the way they are, but because of the way that they someday shall be. We will persevere for only so long as we deny the urges that will evolve our enemies. I no longer become Rig for this reason. You brag about teaching him by being his worst enemy. I fear that you have the power to succeed in making him our worst enemy. Odin sobered as he drank some truth from his stepson's warning. We are beings doomed by fate, and cursed to know our destinies without being able to do anything to change them. Knowing that, how can you ask me to do anything other than that which I do? Yes, Heimdall nodded in agreement, having found his own greater understanding. I am cursed to know my fate, to even speak of it openly, but that changes nothing. He stared directly at Fastillion and studied him closely, as though seeing something new in the nine worlds and wanting to appreciate it. So it begins. Odin was ready to depart, but he paused to settle the matter of his Einherjar. Order your dog soldiers to cut out their hearts if that amuses you, he told Immaculate Flying Snake, but do get on with it. They're already dead and sworn to rise again at my command. It matters not what you do. You confuse me with others, Immaculate Flying Snake responded. I have no need for such things. They shall be set free. I know you're going to need them all, and even then it won't be enough. The Jaguar Lord rose up, then snarled a command at his two kings, turned generals in the afterlife. Release the prisoners. Your valor is witnessed, and those of you with captives can take credit for their sacrifice. The knights released their captured Einherjar. Many of them had broken legs or dislocated knees and had great difficulty moving about unaided. A gesture from Odin signaled his stepson to blow a marshalling note from Gjala. As the sound passed over the Einherjar, they began a rapid process of healing. Spilled entrails slithered back into butchered bodies, and severed limbs flew back to their owners to reattach themselves. Both the wounded and the slain rose up whole and unharmed. The warriors bore no lingering rage from the battle. They laughed and joked with one another, and even seemed to feel an amused fellowship with the Jaguar knights who had battled them. Immaculate Flying Snake reached into his tunic, then drew forth a handful of maize kernels. He cast them about as though he seeded the ground. As each of the kernels fell upon one of the Jaguar knights, a golden radiance briefly illuminated the warrior. The dead returned to life, the wounded healed, and the already whole rejoiced in their renewed vitality. With his business concluded, the king god of the west ruffled the neck of his panther servant as he instructed, "Watch him and keep me informed." Immaculate Flying Snake turned about, stepped back through the smoke mirror, and then was gone. Odin stalked back up his rainbow bridge, then his stepson rode up after him with the Einherjar in pursuit. Once they had all ascended, the Bifrost Bridge retracted behind them, then together they were gone. The Jaguar Lord departed through the smoke mirror, and then the Jaguar Knights filed in after him. Before long, Fastillion remained alone with the two Jaguar generals, and they surprised him by approaching to examine him closely. "I don't envy the decisions that you have to make," Lightning Frog told Fastillion conversationally. "Regardless of how well you endure the misfortunes that fate has allotted for you, in the end you must still turn against one side of your own ancestry." Fastillion didn't understand what he meant. "I know nothing about my parents, your people, or your weird god of many feathers. What makes all of you so certain that I won't just follow in the footsteps of my stepfather, then become a faithful Christian instead? He is the only family I know or care for." "That's exactly the choice that Odin wants to drive you to," Smoking Jaguar explained. "Those who preach peace in the East are entering into an age of violence, and Odin plans to be there and show them the way of that. He wants you to be a Christian priest, his bishop who converts with a blade and makes human sacrifices by fire." "That's ridiculous," Fastillion responded in disbelief. "No Christian would burn men alive or sanction acts of plunder and slaughter. That's not their way, never has been, and never will be." You couldn't be more mistaken, Lightning Frog told Fastillion as he grabbed his shoulder to show that he was a friendly advisor. They've already done as much before, and worse things are yet to come. A season for setting new ways is upon the Christians. The priests in the East are not so gentle as you have been led to believe by your stepfather's example. Fastillion asked him, "What does the East matter to me anyway? I'm not there and have no desire to make the treacherous journey to get there, so it hardly matters." "Just as you're a being of both flesh and spirit," Lightning Frog continued, "so too is your future a thing of both fate and decision. Some journeys must come to pass, while other destinations are yours for the choosing. A measure of freedom is a power you possess that even the gods are denied." "I don't believe in fate," Fastillion defied the notion. "My choices are all my own." "You didn't choose to be born," Smoking Jaguar challenged him. "You aren't alive now, in this ancient land of warriors by any choice of yours, and similarly, you haven't chosen to be mortal, then one day die. By these things, you can see that fate is very much a part of you. I can give you this secret. You make your misfortunes worse by resisting destiny and not embracing it. Like paddling a canoe in the rapids of a river, you are securest when putting your effort into the direction you must already go. My choice is to serve neither Odin nor Immaculate Flying Snake," Fastillion decided. "Tell me how to avoid them." "They've been investing in your future since before your conception," said Lightning Frog. "It's no accident that you are here now or that we're speaking with you. If you wish to escape their influences, you have only one chance I know of." Lightning Frog stepped away from Fastillion in preparation of entering the smoke mirror. "You must embrace the currents of their meddling and use them to make you strong. You may become powerful enough that when the time is right, you can win your freedom and go your own way." Fastillion felt discouraged. "All I want is a simple life, to marry and raise a family with raining sunshine." "That simple life you seek is not meant to be," Smoking Jaguar sympathized as he too approached the smoke mirror. "It was destiny that an impure woman from among your enemies would try and lead you astray with her charms. In time, those same enemies will drive you from your home." It was a horrible revelation that Fastillion didn't want to accept. "What about raining sunshine or the children in our future? Will we all be driven out together to live in Leifsbudir as Norsemen, or am I to be cast out alone while they remain behind?" Lightning Frog paused at the brink of the smoke mirror. "I won't tell you the details, but I can at least explain to you why. I have seen many men die in battle, and many more executed by priests during blood rituals. I know from my long experience that the greatest difference between a coward and a courageous man is foreknowledge. Uncertainty allows a man to face any danger, since he believes that he can always avert his death. When a man knows for certain about the time, place, and manner of his death, he loses the shield of denial and then must agonize in an undignifying, fearful demoralization. To suffer at length with the certain knowledge of death is far worse than the brief moment of actual death itself. That is the reason why we cannot detail the pains of life you are destined to endure, lest it gnaw eternally at your thoughts and rob you of your equanimity. You will need all your strengths for the trials ahead." Fastillion complained. "Then why did you tell me that the Beothuk were going to ruin my entire life? You speak of death too much for me not to think that is what's coming. Since there is to be war with the Beothuk, you might be saying that they'll win and destroy everything." "You're still too young to see that what you call everything is but a bit part of something much greater," Lightning Frog consoled him. "All life is to be savored for what it is. Embrace what you have while you have it. Make the most of it, and when it's gone, mourn it properly, then press on." He could relate to Lightning Frog's warning about foreknowledge, but Fastillion still felt discouraged. Just the hints he had received made him search his imagination for all the ways the Beothuk could wound him. "Is there nothing good you can tell me? What if I just never get married at all and leave the Micmac of my own accord? Where will your inevitable destiny be then?" "Try and understand," Smoking Jaguar instructed. "You're speaking of fighting the current I warned you about. You cannot make your life better by rejecting your goals or your responsibilities. If you try and run, you will only deny yourself your successes, making the tragedy far worse. To prove to you that life is not all pain, I'll tell you this. One day your wife shall give you a child that will bring you such happiness that you will know then that all your past misfortunes and sacrifices were worth enduring 100 times over. You must fight, persist, and survive for that child, if not for you alone." "If what you say is true," Fastillion reasoned, "then it works both ways. If I cannot escape fate through cowardice or fleeing danger, then neither can I escape it through recklessness or plunging in headlong as a berserker would. Since the Beothuk are to ruin me, then I shall make them pay dearly for the privilege." Lightning Frog grinned ruthlessly as a man accustomed to battle. "That is my gift to you. I give a piece of wisdom from a great warlord of the past to a fellow great warlord of the future. Take your revenge upon the befouled shamans of the Bearthuk. Kill as many as you can. The time will come when they are beyond your reach. Punish them now so that unfulfilled hatred does not consume you later." Fastillion took great reassurance in his knowledge that his marriage with Reigning Sunshine would last for some years, and that they had the destiny to produce at least one wonderful child. Even so, he knew that some calamity loomed upon their horizon, and one day their happiness would founder. It made him want to be with her to start making the most of what they could share. While Fastillion pondered what he had seen and learned, the two Jaguar generals pounded their chests, then extended their arms in a warrior's salute. Both of them entered the smoke mirror, which promptly dispersed into loose fumes after they were gone. Fastillion spent a long time just contemplatively staring into the cold, misty darkness that surrounded him.